Why do we trust the calendar? Because it gives us a sense of control, a sense that the world is predictable, that no matter how chaotic life becomes, at least time remains steady. But what if it does? What if the calendar is lying to you? What if the year isn't 2025, but actually 1728? What if 300 years of history never happened? This is not just a wild conspiracy. It is a theory, carefully crafted, shockingly detailed, and disturbingly plausible. A theory that questions the very foundation of our shared timeline. And it all began with one man, one claim, one simple question. What if time itself was edited? This is the phantom time hypothesis. And tonight on 100K Wise, we step into a world where history might be fiction. Part 1, Waking Up in the Wrong Century. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that everything you believed about history was wrong. That the kings you read about in school, the wars you memorized for exams, even the centuries that shaped civilization never happened. Not forgotten, not misremembered, but completely made up. This is exactly what German historian Heribert Illig proposed in 1991. His idea, that nearly 3 entire centuries, from 614 to 911 AD, were fabricated, inserted into our historical timeline, invented by powerful rulers, and accepted by the world without question. He called it the phantom time hypothesis. According to Illig, the year is not 2025, it's 1728, and we are living in the wrong century. Now you may be wondering, how could this happen? Who would dare rewrite history? And why would anyone go to such lengths? According to Illig, it all began with a single ambition. A desire not to bend the future, but to shape the past. He believed that Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, along with Pope Sylvester II, and possibly Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, deliberately falsified the calendar. Their motive, to place Otto's reign in the most symbolic year possible, the year 1000 AD. You see, in the medieval world, timing was everything. To rule during a millennium was to be seen as a divine figure, chosen by God, greater than all rulers before, greater than all rulers after. So instead of waiting, they adjusted the timeline. They created false centuries, inserted fictional events, and gave birth to a historical illusion that fooled generations. For Heribert Illig, this wasn't just speculation. He believed he had evidence, mathematical inconsistencies, missing architecture, lack of written records, a calendar that didn't quite add up, and he asked one terrifying question. If 300 years of history were faked, what else have we accepted as truth? That question would lead him down a dark and twisting path through calendars, kingdoms, and cathedrals. A path we'll follow together in the next part of our story. So who exactly were the men accused of rewriting history? Heribert Illig pointed to 3 names, 3 powerful figures at the heart of medieval Europe. Otto III, Holy Roman Emperor. Pope Sylvester II, the most influential religious figure of the time. And Constantine VII, Emperor of the Byzantine Empire. Together, Illig claimed they altered time itself. But why? Why forge 3 centuries? Why go to such unimaginable lengths? The answer was power, specifically the power of symbolism. You see, in medieval Europe, the year 1000 wasn't just a number, it was divine, it was cosmic. It marked 1,000 years since the birth of Christ. To rule in that year would mean you were chosen, set apart, holy. Illig believed that Otto III wanted his reign to align with this sacred milestone. But history didn't cooperate. He was born too early. The real date was somewhere in the 700s. So what did Otto do? According to the theory, he didn't wait for the future. He changed the past. He created 3 centuries that never happened, from 614 to 911 AD, so that his reign would sit neatly at the dawn of the second millennium. Illig called it the greatest historical forgery ever committed, and to pull it off, Otto needed help. That's where Pope Sylvester II came in. The Pope had the authority to shape calendars, revise religious dates, and bless political power. With the Pope's approval, the new timeline could be enforced, and once written, it would become reality. After all, who writes history? The victors, the rulers, the church. And they weren't just shifting years on a scroll. They were inserting entire people, battles, and empires into the timeline, so that future generations, us, would never question it. But Illig did, and he began to look for proof. Real, measurable proof that those centuries were artificial. He started with the calendar, because if time had been tampered with, surely the calendar would reveal the lie. And what he found shook the academic world. It all started with a simple question. Why does the Gregorian calendar skip only 10 days when it should have skipped 13? To understand how time may have been forged, we have to start with something simple. The calendar, not the kind that hangs on your wall, but the kind that rules our world. The calendar is more than a tool. It's a system of trust. It tells us when to plant, when to pray, when to go to war. It anchors everything, our past, our present, and our imagined future. So what happens when the numbers don't add up? Heribert Illig noticed something strange. And it all began with a moment in history that seemed normal until it was. In the year 1582, Pope Gregory XIII made a bold move. He reformed the calendar. Before this, the world had used the Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 45 BC. That calendar assumed a year was 365, 25 days long. So every 4 years, an extra day was added, leap year. But there was a problem. The Earth's true orbit around the Sun is slightly shorter, 365, 24,219 days. A tiny error, almost invisible at first. But over centuries, that difference stacked up. Every 128 years, the Julian calendar lost a full day. By the 1500s, the calendar was out of sync with the spring equinox. This caused a crisis in the church. Easter, which was meant to fall on March 21st, was drifting closer to March 11th. So Pope Gregory stepped in. He announced the Gregorian calendar, the one we still use today. And to realign time, he did something radical. On October 4th, 1582, people went to bed, and the next day was October 15th. 10 days vanished overnight, but here's where it gets strange. If the Julian calendar had been used since 45 BC, the drift should have been 13 days, not 10. 3 days were unaccounted for. 3 days missing from the correction. Illig found this odd, painfully odd, because 3 days of calendar error would take roughly 300 years to accumulate. And 300 years is exactly what his phantom time hypothesis claims were fabricated. Was this a mathematical mistake? Or was it a hidden clue? Illig believed this was not an error. It was intentional. He argued that Pope Gregory, knowingly or unknowingly, preserved a false timeline. By correcting only 10 days, the Church concealed a gap that never should have existed. If the Julian calendar had run unbroken from Caesar to Gregory, the correction should have matched the drift. But it didn't. And this, Illig claimed, proved that 3 centuries were artificially inserted, that the years from 614 to 911 AD never happened. To many, it sounded outrageous. But Illig wasn't done. He said, if time was faked, the signs would be everywhere. In architecture, in documents, in technology. And so he went looking for those signs, not in the future, but in the darkest corner of the past, a place already shrouded in mystery, the Dark Ages. If 300 years never happened, then what should we expect to see, or rather not see? For Heribert Illig, the answer was simple. If time was forged, the evidence would be missing. And the first place he looked was the Dark Ages. Specifically, the years 614 to 911 AD, a stretch of history that always seemed quiet, too quiet. According to Illig, this wasn't just a coincidence. It was a cover-up. He asked a bold question. If nearly 3 centuries really happened, where is the physical proof? Where are the buildings? Where are the inventions? Where are the people? Let's start with architecture. Throughout history, great civilizations have left behind monuments. The Romans built aqueducts. The Egyptians raised pyramids. Even in medieval times, castles and cathedrals rose skyward. But between 614 and 911 AD, something strange happens. There's a gap, a silence in stone. No new major construction, no grand temples, no roads, no cities. According to Illig, it's as if Europe paused for 300 years, then suddenly picked up where it left off. He pointed to buildings from the year 476 AD and noticed they looked shockingly similar to those from 1000 AD. Same styles, same techniques, same materials, no evolution. Illig asked, how could architecture stay frozen for centuries? Imagine if from the 1700s to today we never invented steel, never built skyscrapers, never changed anything. That's the kind of gap Illig saw. And it wasn't just buildings. Written records were missing too. Before and after the Phantom years, there are thousands of documents from kings, governments, scholars. But during 614 to 911, almost nothing. A handful of manuscripts, mostly from isolated monasteries. No royal decrees, no legal documents, no letters from nobles. It was as if civilization itself had vanished. Some historians tried to explain it. They said Europe was recovering from the fall of Rome, that it was a time of chaos, of poverty, of rebuilding. But Illig wasn't convinced. He said, even in dark times, people write, people build, people leave a trace. But in this period, the traces were faint. He even examined a historical document claiming over 1,700 monumental structures were built during those years. But when he and his team investigated, something chilling happened. Over 96% of those sites didn't exist. No ruins, no stones, no remnants. It was a list with no reality. So what were they hiding? Were those years truly lived or simply imagined? If Illig was right, then someone didn't just forge a year. They forged an entire age. And the centerpiece of that age, its hero, its legend, its shining emperor, was about to come under fire. Because in the very heart of the phantom timeline stood one man. A man so famous, so powerful, so revered, that questioning his existence was unthinkable. But Illig dared to ask, what if Charlemagne never existed? In every great historical saga, there is a central figure, a name so big, so towering, so glorified that it becomes untouchable. And in the heart of Europe's medieval legacy, that name is Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, the first Holy Roman Emperor, the unifier of Europe, the man who brought order after the chaos of Rome's fall, a warrior, a reformer, a legend. But what if that legend was fiction? Heribert Illig believed Charlemagne never existed, not as a man, but as a myth, a carefully constructed illusion, a character scripted to fill a historical gap and legitimize the new ruling dynasty. According to Illig, Charlemagne's supposed reign, from 768 to 814 AD, fits perfectly inside the phantom time, the missing centuries, and that made him suspicious. Because if those years were forged, then so was the man who ruled them. Illig asked the uncomfortable questions. How could one man, living in the 8th century, achieve so much? In 46 years of rule, Charlemagne allegedly fought 53 military campaigns, winning nearly all of them, traveled across Europe constantly, reformed education, religion, and law, standardized currency, invented a new writing style, oversaw architecture, promoted agriculture, advanced astronomy, and somehow, while doing all of that, he had time to father 18 children. It reads less like history and more like heroic fiction. A figure too perfect, too productive, too polished to be real. And Illig wasn't the only one who thought so. He discovered that nearly all written records about Charlemagne came not from his time, but from monasteries decades, or even centuries later. Not from emperors, not from foreign rulers, not from enemies, just monks, writing from within the church. And remember, Illig already believed the church was part of the cover-up. Could it be that Charlemagne was created to give the Attinian dynasty a heroic backstory? A golden age that never existed, but made their rule feel legitimate? Because after Charlemagne supposedly died, the Carolingian dynasty collapsed, and in its place rose a new line of rulers, Otto I, Otto II, and Otto III. The same Otto III whom Illig accused of manipulating time. It fit too perfectly, too cleanly. What better way to claim divine right than to follow a godlike emperor? To say, we come after Charlemagne, the greatest leader of all time, even if Charlemagne never was. Even his name, Karl der Grosse, Charles the Great, sounded scripted, like a title, not a person. Illig found it all too convenient. And then, the final clue. Charlemagne's achievements happened during a time where Illig claimed no one was writing, building, or progressing. Yet suddenly this one man appeared and pushed Europe forward in every way. It didn't make sense, unless he was never real, unless he was written backward into time, to fill a silence that no one wanted to explain. Was Charlemagne the most powerful emperor Europe ever knew? Or was he the most brilliant invention in historical fiction? That question would shake the foundation of medieval history and force even the skeptics to look again. Because if Charlemagne was fake, then so was everything that followed him. So what do the skeptics say? What do mainstream historians believe? And is there real proof that can save Charlemagne from being erased? We'll find out next. If 300 years were invented, if Charlemagne was a myth, then the lie would be global, not just in Europe. It would stretch across continents, cultures, and civilizations. So the question became, what do the rest of the world's records say? Because even if European rulers rewrote time, the stars didn't. And the first serious challenge to Heribert Illig's theory came from the heavens, astronomy. Scientists turned to celestial records, things that can't be edited, things that don't lie, like solar eclipses. One was recorded in 418 AD by both Roman and Chinese observers. Another occurred in 879 AD, right in the middle of the so-called phantom time. If those years never existed, those eclipses shouldn't have happened. And yet, they did. Not just in Europe, but also in Islamic and Asian sources. Then came the records of Halley's Comet. It appeared in 760 AD and again in 837 AD. Just as it was supposed to, observed independently by scholars in China, Baghdad, and Europe. If 3 centuries were missing, those appearances would be misaligned. But they weren't. Time, according to the cosmos, was intact, and that wasn't all. Coins and artifacts began surfacing, dating to the missing years. From Viking ships in Norway, to Islamic currency from the Abbasid Caliphate, to Byzantine chronicles describing Charlemagne's interactions with the East. And then there was the elephant. Yes, an elephant. In 802 AD, Caliph Harun al-Rashid of Baghdad sent a gift to Charlemagne, a real elephant, named Abul Abbas. French records mention it, so do Islamic ones. 2 cultures, worlds apart, remembering the same event. Could they both have invented it? Could they both have faked the same lie? To many scholars, this was the nail in the coffin for the phantom time hypothesis. Charlemagne, they argued, was real. His deeds may have been exaggerated, yes, but he existed. And so did the years he lived in. So, was Illig wrong? Maybe. But here's the strange thing. Even the counterarguments left space for mystery. Because while they disproved total fabrication, they didn't explain the silence. The missing architecture, the gap in written records, the sudden explosion of progress right after 911 AD. Something still felt off. Could it be that Illig was wrong about the details, but right about the pattern? That history had been smoothed over, polished, compressed. Maybe not 300 years, but maybe something was altered. Maybe time, like memory, can be edited gently, not erased entirely, but blurred, to suit the victors, to glorify the myth, to control the future by shaping the past. So we're left with a question. Do we really know what year it is? Or have we simply agreed to believe the version that's easiest to follow? Heribert Illig may not have uncovered a perfect theory, but he uncovered a crack. And once you see that crack, you can't unsee it, because behind every date is a choice, and behind every timeline, a story.